Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Ponte las Pilas with T-ville LI Leadership. I'm here with...
I'm Monica.
I'm Mr. Farnes.
I'm Michelle.
I'm Mia.
And I'm Jesus. As you guys can see, we have a special guest.
Hi, everybody.
The best LI teacher
Thanks.
ever.
For those of you guys who don't know, this is Mr. Farnes. He's the upperclassman LIA teacher, and we're just going to be asking you a couple questions. And first, we're going to start off with, what's your background? Where were you born? How many siblings?
So I'm from California originally. I was born by Oakland, essentially. But I grew up in a town called Manteca. And that's normally where I claim where I'm from. I did a study abroad in Guatemala for a summer. And I found that telling people that I'm from Manteca worked really well because in Mexico, Guatemala, it means lard. And it's named after a lard factory. And so when you talk to Hispanic people, they're like, who's this tall white dude? But if I'm like, hey, I'm from lard, they're like, oh, this guy's funny. Okay, I'll trust him. I lived in Manteca for 14 years. I actually graduated from high school in San Diego. I came up to Utah to go to BYU. And then I've been here since. So I've been here for almost 20 years. Siblings, I've got 5 siblings. People ask me about my tattoo often. You probably can't see it there, but this is a tattoo I have of my siblings. So it's a sibling tattoo that we all got together in Portland, and it has to do with biology symbols. So circles are girls, squares are guys, and so all 6 of us went and got it together. Other things, I studied psychology at BYU, and so I originally was a school counselor. I was a school counselor for 7 years, and then I switched into teaching. And I did a school counseling program at the U when I finished with BYU. So that's kind of my background.
I don't know if this is in the dialogue, but why an LI teacher?
Why an LA teacher?
What made you be like, I want to be with Hispanic students and make sure they're doing their stuff and be on their butt about getting their grades up and making sure they're getting scholarships and stuff? Why that?
Yeah, I think something that's really important for students is to realize that you don't have to have a plan in high school. And you don't have to have your plan all laid out, because I get a lot of kids that they're like, oh, I can't go to college because I don't know what I want to do. And when I was in high school, I wanted to be an architect. And that was my plan. I was going to do architecture. I said that from the time I was 5. When people were saying, in kindergarten, what do you want to do? And people are like, I want to be a policeman. And
that was me.
Yeah. Everyone's like, I want to be a policeman. There's these generic things that people always say. And I always said architect. And my teacher was always like, architect?
I don't know what that is.
Right? And then they'd have to spell it on the board. I remember there was one time where they couldn't even spell it. They're like, I don't know how to spell architect. And so, and then I took a class in high school and hated it. I thought it was boring, so boring, the most boring class.
So boring for architecture.
Yeah, it's a lot of sitting and a lot of computer work, and that doesn't work very well for me. And so I actually took a psychology class in college. There was this girl that I thought she was cute, and she asked me if I wanted to take psychology. And I said, yeah, of course I do. So I took it.
Was your guys' date?
It didn't work out. But I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was fascinating. I loved going back to my dorm and reading the book. And that was the first time that I ever really, really enjoyed reading a textbook. I thought it was fascinating. So after architecture fell apart, I was just thinking, what can I do? And I liked the psychology, and I thought, what can I do with psychology? And I thought, I'll do school counseling. And it's kind of ironic in a way, because I remember as a high school student turning to one of my friends and saying about the school counselor. A school counselor walked past us, and I said, gosh, what did they do in their life to end up like that? They had to have done something horrible. Just that's a horrible thing to say, but I just thought that school counselors were awful. We're just lazy people that couldn't find other jobs in other places. And then that's what I ended up doing myself.
The tables turned.
Yeah. And also just being a teacher, I never wanted to be a teacher as a kid. I never thought it would be something I'd be interested in. So I did the school counseling because I really liked working with high school students. I liked working with high school students to improve themselves and like find out what behaviors they had that were good and how they could improve those, and just like improving their own lives. And I found that really rewarding. When I became a counselor, I found like this huge need among the Hispanic population, not just at Taylorsville, but like statewide. So when I first started, the high school graduation rate, and this was 11 years ago, so 11 years ago, the high school graduation rate for Hispanic males in Utah was less than 50%. So that means that if you were a Hispanic male in Utah, you were more likely to drop out of high school than graduate. And that is just, that's abysmal. That means that we as an education system are doing something wrong. And I saw just like this real need in that community that like hadn't really been filled. And so it was just a niche that I really enjoyed. And that just kind of developed into Latinos in Action, where I got a little bit tired of school counseling. It's very sedentary. I'm a very active person. I like moving. Like one of my favorite hobbies is running. I like to run up mountains, and like that's something I do for fun. And so just sitting behind a desk all day was pretty just like draining. The other weird thing about Latinos in Action is that I liked working with students, and I liked working with them about behaviors and improving themselves and just counseling. And I could do more of that as a teacher than as a counselor. And so also like Hispanic culture is really, really fun. It's very different from the culture that I grew up in. So like I grew up in a very Caucasian culture, and like Hispanic culture, and especially Mexican culture, is very loud, it's very vibrant, it's very fun, it's very expressive, and I think that that's really fun. I enjoy that a lot. It works well with my personality, and I feel like it's something that I didn't have growing up in my own culture, and I think that it's a culture that, I think it's something that's really beautiful and something that I think is really like, or should really be celebrated.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like as one of your students, I've noticed that you're really passionate about being with the students and being an LA teacher. But if you weren't an LA teacher, what do you think you would be doing right now?
Okay, so I have lots of just like little pastimes and hobbies. I love art, and I talk about it sometimes. I do. It's funky, guys. I'm just gonna say that it's funky. I do duct tape art. Which people are always like, oh, cool, you make dresses and wallets and things like that. And no, it's like photorealistic stuff out of duct tape. So I have made several murals that are like really big. The biggest one I've ever made is 40 feet long, all out of duct tape. And so like I've got one downtown, I've got a couple in Harriman, and I think it's just fun. And so I like to make things out of unique materials. And generally like photorealistic things out of unique materials. So if I wasn't doing this, I'd be an artist. Yeah.
Farnes the artist.
Farnes the artist.
You see it?
It doesn't rhyme quite. It's a little. You got to work on that rhyme a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Why duct tape?
People ask me that all the time, and I don't have a good answer. I feel like I should, like, oh, it's passionate, and it, like just like some kind of artist thing where it's like it's this like modern revolution about world blah blah blah, and like no, it's just it was there.
Duct tape because it was invented in 18 something. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Like some kind of clever response. The real reason is in college I had a roommate, and he would just go on the internet all the time and just look at like cool artsy stuff. And so we weren't allowed to paint our room, and so he got painter's tape, just the blue tape, and he made a bunch of images on the wall, and they were really cool. I liked them, and so when I moved, I did that same thing. I like made images on my wall out of painter's tape, and then it just kind of evolved to like being more permanent and having more colors, but like truthfully, I'm not passionate about duct tape, like the material itself. Actually, my favorite one that I've ever done is out of carpet samples. So it's like a big 20-foot by 20-foot mural out of carpet samples, and I love it. So it was the Salt Palace, which is a convention center downtown. They contacted me, and they had just like, do you guys know what carpet samples are?
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure you
Like the
showed
ones
us
that they
a
have at Home
picture.
Depot?
Yeah, where it's like the big, it's like that big of just like a big board with all the different colored carpets.
Carpets, yeah.
Yeah. So the Salt Palace contacted me and they're like, hey, we got 4 pallets of carpet samples. Would you like these? And I was like, oh, of course I want those. And so I brought them home, and my roommate, my landlady that lived with me, she was just like, what is this? And I always said that she liked my art only slightly more than she really hated it because I just had it all over the place.
That was gonna be my question. So like, as an artist that like uses like random materials, does that mean like your house looks like kind of a mess? 'Cause, like you have like different materials all over the house. Like let's say you have duct tape in this corner, and in the other corner you have carpet, and then I don't know where you have like random cardboard. Like, is that how it looks?
I would like to say that my house is so clean. My house is really clean, guys. But a little bit.
A
My
little
latest
bit.
project, I really like plants
It looks
too.
like that, but organized.
Not really.
They're everywhere.
They're like I've got like 400 plants growing right now in my hallway. It's just
What?
like, yeah, I've got like 12 grow lights of just like succulents. So just like I want to replace my grass with succulents. It's like low water plants, but they're really expensive. Like each little pod is like $4 at Home Depot. But if you grow them yourself, I mean, you can get like one of those little grow things, and there's like 60 pods in it, and so once you get it, it's cheap. And so, yeah, my house is a little bit of a mess, but
So it's not clean.
but
you say
it's
it's clean.
very clean.
Yeah.
I can clean it up.
But you just won't.
I generally
You just
don't. I'm
won't.
not.
It's like when you tell your LI students, like, make sure you do this, but you know they won't do it.
Yeah. My dad would always get so angry at me when I was a kid because he'd be like, "Clean your room," and I would just have, as Monica sighs, like a little trauma there. I would just have like piles and stacks of stuff, and I would just like move the piles. And one day he came and he's like, "You haven't cleaned anything. You just moved piles." And I'm like, "Kinda."
That's cleaning for me.
Yeah. So.
That's how I imagine your house, Mr. Farnes. Just one side plants, the other side duct tape, the other side carpet, the other side paint.
And then like all
And
the
then
outdoor
LA.
stuff too. So there's like, but I have a couple roommates, and they're all we're all the same level of messy, and so it's nice. Like we're not dirty, but like we all have lots of hobbies that we enjoy. So I've got a roommate who really loves outdoor stuff, and so like she just got back from I don't remember, but somewhere, and so like her outdoor stuff is in the dining room. So you know it's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, so no room is.
Anyway, what's the next question? My house is super clean. Next question.
What would you give some tips to kids who are struggling with school right now?
I think something important is find something in school, or find a person in school that you connect to. So like find that teacher, find that thing that you feel really passionate about, and just really try to connect to them. And then the other thing too is like it's okay to struggle in school. It's okay to have times where you struggle in life, and we all have those things that we struggle. And I think sometimes you just gotta dig deep and push through it. If you've been digging deep and pushing through it for a while and you're like a little burnt out, then I think at that point, find those resources here at school that can help you out. So like teachers, friends, counselors, and just the other thing too is know that you can do good at school. Something that I feel sad about is when I talk to students and they're just like, oh yeah, I can't do math. Like math is impossible. I'm never gonna be a math person. And knowing that you can do well at school and you can be successful at school. And that's not to say it's going to be easy. Like math could always be something that you struggle with. But with work, you can do well at it. Or at least pass the class. With work, you can pass the class.
Well, how long have you been a teacher here, and what are some of your favorite memories?
So I've been a teacher 4 years, which is actually, it's been an odd time period to be a teacher. Because my first year was the year that we shut down for COVID. So I had like 3/4 of what I would call normal teaching, or what I thought was normal teaching, and then we got into COVID, and then the following year was COVID year, and then the following year was still kind of, it was like back from COVID, plus we had freshmen, so it was a really weird year. And this is the first year where I feel like it's almost back to that time period 4 years ago. But also 4 years ago, it was my first year, and like I struggled a little bit to know how to teach Latinos in action. Like I try to make it much more of an academic class, and I had a starter every day that people had to put in their notebooks that I think was a great idea, and I still think is a great idea. But like at the end of the quarter when it was due, I just saw everyone. It would like if we were all at a table, it'd be like one person would open up the notebook and just pass it around, and everyone else would just copy it, like legit in front of me. And I'm just like, guys, if you're gonna cheat, like do it a little bit better, like not in front of me, like it's like explicit. And I kind of gave up on that, and like realizing that. This class is far more social than academic and far more relationship based than academic, and that the values of this class are different values than I went through in school, because my school was so academic based, and I never took any type of class like this, and so having to change how I taught was something that was important, and then just like trying to navigate teaching over the last 3 years has been something that's been really difficult, as it has been for all of you. Like navigating school, I mean, school for you guys has been COVID, which is kind of weird to think about. Like your freshman year was the COVID year, and so like you don't know high school without COVID, and that's kind of crazy to think about. That like, yeah, like this is the first year that I feel like it's almost back to normal.
But not fully.
It's not fully, and it may never be.
Like it is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And
No, go. You're good.
And I also feel like COVID really just affected us being students, because I'm not the same student I was when I was in 8th grade.
Sure. And like nothing, it will never go back to how it was before, because like things change and that's fine. But it is weird to think about, like especially you guys as seniors and your high school experience, and how dramatically different that has been from anyone else in American history because of COVID. I think that my best experiences as a teacher, I love seeing kids see them succeed in ways that they thought that potentially they couldn't. So for example, yesterday there was a student who was talking to me who got a full ride scholarship to the U. And that was just
Alexis?
Yeah, he got it.
Yes, he
did.
told me, and I was like, we were at the gym.
Yeah.
And then he's like, guess what? And he's like, I got a full ride scholarship to the U. And I was
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
I was so proud of him.
Me too. I'm just really happy for him. And like the really cool thing with Alexis too is that so I used to teach English for immigrants, essentially is the class. They call it English language development. So if you're an immigrant to the United States and you're brand new and you don't speak any English, you have to take that class. And that was the class that I used to taught. And so when Alexis came, he was in that class. And to like be able to see his development over the last 3 years, from his sophomore year to this year, where like, I mean, he came from Mexico and his English was it was better than a lot of.
He feels weird.
Yeah, and like it was better than a lot of a lot of people that came because he had that ability. But to see his development over the last 3 years, where he came with very limited English ability to where now he got a full ride scholarship at the University of Utah, and to see that level of progression, that's a really beautiful thing. Like that's some dramatic growth in 3 years. It also reminds me of his cousin, who was the SBO president here at Taylorsville High, like 4, 5, 6 years ago, something like that. Who also got he got like a $25,000 scholarship, and a similar thing. Like to see his growth over those 3 years as he was here was something that I really enjoyed. So when I had the ability to see students and see them develop. And see them succeed, I think that that's just a really beautiful and amazing thing.
Wow. Yeah, he's like, can't go to the gym today, bro. I need to go to an interview for my scholarship. I was like, go ahead, take the day, go do your thing.
Can't go to the gym, bro. I gotta go to dinner to celebrate my thousands of dollars I just got.
So you've been working here at Taylorsville for 4 years. What's the most like eye-opening thing you've learned?
I've actually been at Taylorsville for 11 years.
Oh, 11 years.
So I
4 as a teacher, no?
Yeah, so 4 as a teacher and then 7 as a counselor. And I did leave, so to become a teacher, the license is different from a counselor license. So like counselors can't be teachers and teachers can't be counselors. It's just kind of this weird like divide between the two. So when I decided I wanted to become a teacher, I had to actually quit my job and go do student teaching. And so there was a period there where I left here and I did student teaching over at Cottonwood. The most eye-opening thing,
Or even just in general, like it doesn't really have to be about high school.
and maybe just going back to that COVID part that we talked about is like just how like dramatic your education has been, especially compared to mine. Like COVID didn't exist when I was in high school. Like that was definitely a different world. And I also think one of the biggest things that I've found where for me in high school, everything was so heavily focused on academics. It was just like academics, and not really on anything else. And I think the importance for classes like Latinos in Action, and especially a class like Latinos in Action for the Hispanic community, where you guys can go and you can communicate and you can talk with people from your own culture, people that understand you. I think there's just a real value in being seen and not having to explain yourself. And just like people, like you walk in and people, they get it. Like you can say, like just to give of things that happen, like you can say I'm a no sabo and people get that. You can like talk about, you can like jump from English to Spanish and people get it. You can like listen to corridos and like people get it. And it's nice to be able to have a spot in a school where you have that place where you can just be. And I think that community is something that is so important for success in school. And I think that having that place where you feel loved and belonged is so important for school. And that like, yeah, academics are really important, but also like the emotional part of school and like the connecting to school is also really, really important, so that like you've got a spot. And I think that that's when people succeed in school, is when they feel like they belong, they feel like they have a spot, they feel like they're loved, they feel like they're seen, and that's when like they give more to it. I think that there's so much that. Well, let me back up. In the copy room, there's a sign that says no significant learning happens without a relationship, or something like that. And essentially saying that like to be able to connect with or to be able to help students learn, you need to have a relationship with them. And I think it's the same thing with students. Like for students to be able to learn, they need to have a relationship with something in the school. And there can be lots of things that is. It could be a club, it could be a class, it could be a sport. I mean, like walking over here, I just walked past Dungeons and Dragons Club, and like it's amazing how many people are there every Friday, and how for a lot of them, that's their connection to school. Like they like Dungeons and Dragons, they don't like anything else, and they're like, cool, I'm here on Friday. But they have something that connects them and brings them in, and I think that that is something that's really important. And I think that LIA is really important because for a lot of kids, it provides that. It provides that spot where they feel connected and they feel seen.
Wow. That's true, guys. That's the only reason I come to school, because of LIA.
Thanks. It's the reason I come to school.
Well, because you
I mean, it is.
That's true.
Mr. Farnes, you were talking about how you were a counselor. I feel like you were my cousin's counselor at some point when he came from Mexico.
Probably. What's his last name?
Zavala?
Salala?
Yeah.
Maybe. I was always the counselor from M to P, or M to R. And there was one year where I had S's, but just like a very small smidgen of S's.
With Savannah, so it's S-A, so you probably got
It's possible.
It's ZA, but...
Oh, then no, I wasn't.
You said Zavala.
Yeah.
It's a Z.
I mean, they're both...
He came
They're
from
similar.
Mexico when I was in 7th grade, and he was a sophomore.
Okay.
And he would talk, him and my mom would talk a lot about you.
Oh.
How you were like really loud, and you would like teach him like for school, or like you would always help him, or...
Good.
Yeah.
So my counselors have alphabets, and my alphabet was always M to R, but also I was kind of just the Spanish-speaking
Yeah,
counselor.
like the translator.
Yeah, so I was the only counselor for years and years that spoke Spanish in the counseling center. So if there was ever a new student from a Spanish-speaking country, whatever their last name was, I always got them, and it was always just kind of like cool, go to Farnes. And so yeah, I probably did.
Farnes, where'd you learn how to speak Spanish?
So I've always been interested in Spanish language and Spanish culture. My grandpa is actually 100% Spanish, and well, it's a little bit weird.
From Spain?
Yeah.
Like Espanol?
Yeah. But he's a redhead, and so you would never think, he's not your stereotypical person that you think of when you think of Spanish people. But actually I went back to Spain one time, and it's kind of fun because they have the plazas there, and like they have music, and they like at night that's just where you congregate there. And like all the old people everywhere, I was like, oh my god, this is like my grandpa everywhere. Like everywhere I looked, I was just like all these people.
Look into my grandpa. What am I doing?
Yeah, it was weird. And so like my grandpa grew up in San Francisco, and his parents spoke Spanish to him. So like it was a Spanish-speaking house. My grandpa claims he can speak Spanish, or claimed he can speak Spanish. But it was never very good. I asked him to help me on an assignment one time, and I was like, in high school, and it wasn't very good.
I was good on my own.
Right? That's what I wanted to say, like a perfect 10, which like you don't really say anyways. But like, and he was just like, I don't know, and it was just like, whatever, I'll do this myself. So I took 4 years in high school. So I went all the way up to AP Spanish, and frankly, my Spanish was not very good. I just remember like being in AP Spanish after 4 years and being like, por and para, they're the same word. Why are we learning that? I don't get it. And like the difference between Sarah and a star, like after 4 years, I was like, I don't get it. Just like, they're the same word, right? They're the same word. And so I did that for 4 years. I did an LDS mission in Oregon, of all places, Spanish speaking. And that's where I learned quite a bit. And then also being back here, so as a counselor, being the only counselor who spoke Spanish, that was probably my biggest experience in learning Spanish. Because there was days where I would go home and literally I just spoke Spanish all day long. And so, yeah, just like being here and having to speak Spanish all day. And it's interesting, like, to see my Spanish develop or not develop, but like evolve. Where like when I was a counselor, my Spanish was so formal. It was very, very formal. In fact, so speaking of Alexis's cousin, his name is Gio, and one time he's like, "Why is your Spanish so formal? Like, why do you speak like that?" And it was just like that's how it was taught. And like when you're taught Spanish, it's far more formal. It's not very slangy. Whereas now, like my Spanish is definitely like being around students all the time. It's like definitely gotten a lot less formal. And, like,
That's what's girls late.
All the examples came to my head, but I'd rather not.
Right? Yeah.
It's one from Buenos días, estudiantes. ¿Qué onda? ¿Cómo estás?
Yeah, right. Yep, pretty much.
You're like, compadre, or the other time you said that word, I was like, I did not expect Farnes to say that.
Yeah, so, but like, I mean, that's just like any kind of language. Like, you speak like the people that you're around. And so when I'm around, like, in a counseling center where you're around, like, parents who are very formal and very polite, especially to a counselor, like, that's how you end up talking back to them. And then when you're around students all day long, it's like, you know, it's a little less.
Well, speaking of students, I know that we're perfect students, right, Mr. Farnes?
Of course.
But how do you deal with disrespectful students?
I really love disrespectful students, actually, which is odd to say.
Red flag.
Right. So before I started my program up at the U for school counseling, I worked at a treatment center down in Utah County. And there is a disorder, I guess is the best word for it, called ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder. And essentially it's kids that are just like, they're defiant all the time. They're just like, no, I'm not going to follow you. I'm not going to follow the rules. No. And not really for any reason. They just do it because that's how they are. And those were actually my favorite students to work with. I like whenever we got an ODD student in, I was like, yeah, let's do this.
A new challenge.
Yeah, like, level up. And I don't know what it is about them. I actually think that disrespectful students in general are really easy to work with. And I think part of it is just having that relationship with them. And I think that their experience for so long is that when they're disrespectful to a teacher, it just elevates really quick. So like they're disrespectful and then the teacher is disrespectful to them, or an adult or someone else. So like they're disrespectful and then like someone's disrespectful to them, so then they're more disrespectful, and it just like builds and builds and builds and builds. And something that like I think what it is it just doesn't bother me. And especially in the high school setting, like working at a treatment center, it's almost like one step below jail. So like the language, the insults, the fights, they're like all way more extreme. And when I'm at high school, it's like, oh, this is nothing, guys. Like this is nothing. So like the disrespect here is very little compared to disrespect in other places. And I think that going back to that relationship and that connection, I think that when you essentially just ignore the disrespect and build that relationship, those kids I find just open up really, really quick and really, really easily. And so I really enjoy actually disrespectful kids. And I think that just being honest and straight and upfront with them. So like having boundaries, having clear-cut boundaries, sharing those boundaries, reinforcing those boundaries, but also like coupling that with love and respect and just like trying to build that relationship with that kid. And so that's a group of people that I actually really enjoy working with. So oddly enough.
Wow, Mr. Farnes. Honestly, props. I
Oh,
could
thanks.
never.
I don't have the patience for
I-
that.
right?
If you disrespect me, I'm gonna disrespect
Hispanics
you
don't
back.
have patience with that. In general, your mom be like, "Calmate, te calmo," and that's like we really don't have patience for that. Hispanic people.
That's true.
All right, and last question is, has there ever been a time where you wanted to quit being a teacher?
He's gonna be like, every day I'm here.
No.
Maybe.
No.
Nah, I'm just kidding. I
Um,
feel like you love your job.
I do. I think something that's important that students don't understand is that careers are evolving. And we talk all the time about like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's like, oh, I think a lot of people think I have to choose this career and I have to have it for 35 years and I have to just like stick and do that. And that was my perception. Like when I was a kid, I was going to be an architect, and it was like, yeah, I'll do this for 30 years and then I'll retire, or 35, however long. And I think that knowing that that is, for most people, that's totally unrealistic. Like most people don't stay in the same job for 35 years. Very few people do. And so I think it's important to realize that you don't have to know where you're going to be at the end of your career. That's fine. And your career can change and it can evolve. And I think the important thing is to just keep going forward and doing those things to help you be successful in your career. There's not times where I wanted to quit teaching, but there's definitely times where I wanted to like have my career evolve or have my career change. So kind of like counseling. Like when I went into counseling, I'm not sure if I thought I was going to be there for 30 years. But then like after a couple of years, it just kind of, like I could feel it like, oh, I think that something needs to change and I'm not totally sure what that is. Frankly, I think that that's going to happen one day with Latinos in Action. I don't foresee myself being a teacher for the next 20 years. Or like, I don't foresee myself being in this position for the next 20 years. I think that I'm gonna get burnt out and just feel really tired. Something that I like about LIA is that it can be different every single year, and it can be fresh and it can be novel. And especially where you can take LIA, you can take it up to 4 years, really, or like 3 years from sophomore to senior. I want to make sure that it's a new and novel experience for the most part every year. So like the activities, the lessons, the things I do, like there's certain things that are the same, like the UVU field trip,
Icebreakers.
SMART goals.
Icebreakers that you do at the beginning of the
Yeah, but even those, like I try to switch up from year to year. The committees are the same, but also like I try to have it be a different project every time. And so like some of the structure is pretty similar from year to year, but like the lessons, the activities, I try to make it fresh and try to make it different. So like this year, how we did the whole thing with the Great Salt Lake, like that was something new that you guys had never done before. 3 years ago when we did the murals, that was something different that you never did before. Last year, like every year, I try to keep it different so it's not like, oh, here we are again doing the same thing. And I think that that's important also for careers. Like when I get to the point where I'm just like, ooh, I feel like I'm getting a little stagnant. I feel like that's when I'm going to be at the point where I need some kind of change. And what that change is going to look like, truthfully, right now, I don't have any idea. Because
maybe you'll pursue Farnes the artist.
Maybe. Possibly. But like right now, I'm not in that point.
You'll start your duct tape company, maybe.
Duct tape art. I'm not at that point yet. And so I'm sure in a couple years I'll start to feel that, because that's kind of what where I get like 5 to 7 years. It's like just something new and something fresh and something novel. And maybe it'll include LIA and something else, or maybe it'll include something else, something different altogether. And I think it's important to realize that that's okay for a career. So I've never wanted to quit, but there's been times where I felt like my career needed to evolve. And I think that I'll get to that point again. And when that happens, then I'll find the next step to keep making this work.
Wow.
Wow.
All right. Before we end up the podcast, is there anything you want like LI students or anybody in general who's listening to the podcast to know, or like you want to promote your LI class for next year so people take it?
Take LIA next year. I think the important thing, kind of like I said, is LIA can be a fantastic community for people here at the school that need it.
And you don't have to be Hispanic to take LIA.
Correct. You don't have to be Hispanic. There are several students who aren't Hispanic who do take LIA, and I think it's a great place to belong, a great place to feel welcome, and a great place to have a community. And I think that that's really important. So.
What's the message you want to leave?
There's a place in Taylorsville for you. So if you, especially for Hispanic students, if you are a Hispanic student, there's a place here for you. And I hope that you feel welcome, and I hope that you feel loved, and I hope that you feel valued. Because as teachers, and not just me, but like teachers, faculty here at Taylorsville High, teachers here care about students and want to see students succeed. And I've had opportunities actually to go to other schools. I've had job offers at other schools. And I specifically chose Taylorsville for the most part because of the faculty. I love who I work with, and I think the faculty here is incredible. I think the administration and the teachers here are some of the best people that I've ever worked with in my life, and I absolutely love them. And I hope that students know how much teachers here care about them.
Well,
Bottom
Taylorsville's
line
a
is,
place for you. That's a
LIA
wrap.
is amazing, and you should take it. Bottom line.
Well, thank you, Mr. Farnes. I
Thank
feel
you,
very
guys.
inspirational now.
Thank you guys. So, and thanks for this podcast. Oh, I guess one last thing. Thanks for this podcast. I love, kind of like what I was saying, I love things that are fresh and new and novel. And when you brought me the idea at the beginning of the year of doing a podcast, I really liked that. I liked that you guys took that risk to do something that you've never done, and something that like has never been done in LIA. So like the idea of a podcast is something that's unique and novel. And that's why Jose Enriquez came in, because like no one else was doing this. And I think that that's a really cool idea that you guys had. And so good job to you guys. I think that that's really impressive. So well done.
Yeah, class of 2023.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mia.
Oh, it's okay.
Or 4.
All right, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Ciao.
See you guys next time.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mr.
Bye.
Barnes.